Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Your support helps me bring you even more amazing stories. In the coastal town of Azure Bay, where the morning air tasted of salt and the sun turned the waves into liquid gold, lived a girl named Elara. At 21, Elara was as wild as the sea she lived by, with skin the color of toasted almonds and hair that refused to be tamed by any ribbon or comb. While the other girls in the village spent their afternoons gossiping at the local bakery or dreaming of marrying into the mayor's family, Elara spent hers wandering the forbidden cliffs and sketching rare plants in her tattered notebook. To the villagers, she was known as the Ghost of the Cliffs. Having lost her parents to a fierce storm years ago, she lived in a small, weathered shack with her grandmother, the only person who truly understood her restless spirit. The neighbors whispered that she was bad luck, watching her from behind their curtains with suspicious eyes. "Normal girls don't climb rocks like mountain goats," the baker's wife would often say with a tisk of her tongue. The blacksmith would usually agree, adding that she was either crazy or cursed. But Elara didn't care for their narrow world. She found more kindness in the howling wind and the shifting tides than in the judgmental people of Azure Bay. High above the village, perched at the very edge of the tallest cliff, sat the Glass Citadel. It was a massive, modern mansion of steel and crystal owned by Alistair Thorne, a 32-year-old tech titan whose name was synonymous with billions. Alistair had come to the Bay to escape the suffocating lights and endless noise of New York, seeking a silence that all his money couldn't seem to buy. Inside his estate was a world-famous botanical garden, a climate-controlled paradise that housed the moonlight orchid, a flower so rare it was said to bloom only once every 5 years, glowing with a ghostly silver light. Elara, driven by a passion for nature that outweighed her fear of high walls, could not resist the temptation. One humid Tuesday night, she scaled the perimeter wall with the grace of a leopard, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She found the orchid in the center of a glass rotunda, its petals shimmering under the moonlight. She was so absorbed in sketching the delicate curves of the flower that she didn't hear the soft hiss of a sliding glass door. "Are you planning to sell it or just stare it to death?" a deep, cold voice asked from the shadows. Elara gasped, her foot slipping on the polished marble ledge, and she tumbled backward. Alistair, reacting with the practiced reflexes of a man who played high-stakes sports, lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground. For a long, breathless moment, the billionaire and the village ghost were frozen. He smelled of expensive cedar wood and aged whiskey. She smelled of sea salt and wild jasmine. "You're trespassing," he said, though he didn't let her go immediately. Elara regained her balance and straightened her dusty skirt, her eyes flashing with a defiance that surprised him. "And you're hoarding," she countered, pointing a finger at the glowing flowers. "Nature didn't make these for a man with a tall fence and a locked heart. They need to bloom for the world to truly exist." Alistair was stunned. Most people stuttered in his presence or tried to impress him with their knowledge of his net worth, but this girl was scolding him for his lack of perspective. "I could have you arrested," he warned, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "And I could tell the world that the great Alistair Thorne has terrible taste in garden lighting," she shot back. Alistair laughed, a genuine, deep sound that his house hadn't heard since the day he bought it. Instead of calling the police, he found himself asking her to stay and explain her sketches. Over the next week, the Glass Citadel saw a strange transformation. The billionaire and the orphan spent their afternoons side by side in the dirt of the garden. Elara taught him that plants didn't just need expensive irrigation, they needed the right spirit of the soil. She showed him how to listen to the rhythm of the bees and how to predict a storm by the way a petal curled. In return, Alistair opened up about the crushing weight of his empire. He spoke of the sharks of the city, who only saw him as a bank account. "In my world, everyone wears a mask," he told her as they sat under a weeping willow. Elara looked at him with eyes that were as clear as the ocean. "Then stop wearing yours, Alistair. You're much more interesting without it." However, Azure Bay was a town of long memories and sharp tongues. When the villagers noticed Alistair's luxury SUV parked near Elara's humble shack, jealousy turned into something far uglier. Clara, the mayor's daughter, who had spent a fortune on designer dresses hoping to attract the billionaire, led a crusade of gossip. "She's a thief," Clara shouted in the town square. "She's used some dark village magic to bewitch the rich man. We must protect our town's reputation from such a girl." One evening, Elara returned home to find her precious sketches torn and scattered across the mud, and cruel words painted on her door. She sat in the dark that night, clutching her grandmother's hand, feeling small and defeated. Her grandmother only squeezed her hand and whispered, "The ocean doesn't stop being the ocean just because the pebbles complain." The reality of Alistair's life eventually came calling in the form of an urgent crisis at his London headquarters. "I have to go, Elara," he said one evening by the shore, his face clouded with the stress of his old life. "I know," she whispered, looking out at the horizon where the sea met the sky. "Birds of paradise don't stay in small bays forever." Alistair left the next morning in a cloud of dust. The village erupted in cruel joy. The girls at the well laughed and mocked her whenever she passed. "We told you, a billionaire doesn't take the trash to the city. He was just playing with a toy until he got bored." 2 weeks of silence passed, and Elara's heart began to feel as heavy as the stones on the beach. But then, a black limousine pulled up to her shack, and a courier in a crisp suit handed her a silver envelope. Alistair had sent for her. He wanted her at his company's 10th anniversary gala in London. The village watched in a collective stunned silence as the ghost girl was driven away to the airport. In London, the challenge was even more daunting. Serena, Alistair's ex-fiancée, a woman who measured the value of people in carats, cornered Elara in a marble ballroom filled with the world's elite. "You look like a common wildflower in a room full of diamonds," Serena sneered, loud enough for the guests to hear. "You don't belong here. You don't know our language, our history, or our worth. You're just a temporary distraction." The room went quiet, everyone waiting for the village girl to break into tears. But Elara stood tall, her gaze steady. She looked at the heavy diamonds around Serena's neck and then into her cold, empty eyes. "You're right," Elara said, her voice carrying across the hall. "I don't know the price of your jewelry, but I know that behind all those stones is a person who is terrified of being alone. I'm not afraid. I have the sea, the wind, and the truth. What do you have when you take off that necklace?" Alistair, who had been watching from the balcony, walked down the stairs and took Elara's hand. He looked at Serena and the gathered crowd with a gaze that could melt steel. "You all think she's out of place, but she's the only real thing in this entire city. Serena, you measured my life in carats. Elara measured my heart in sunsets. The choice was never hard." He turned his back on the cameras and the flashing lights, leading Elara out into the cool London night. 2 days later, the roar of a helicopter shook the quiet air of Azure Bay. It landed right in the middle of the village square. Alistair stepped out, dressed in a simple shirt, and marched straight to Elara's shack. She was outside, mending a fishing net as she always did. "You forgot something in my garden," Alistair shouted over the noise of the rotors. Elara looked up, her eyes wide with wonder. "What?" "Your heart," he said, reaching her and taking her hands in his. The villagers watched from their windows, their jaws dropping in disbelief. Alistair knelt in the dirt, ignoring the stains on his expensive trousers, and pulled out a ring that sparkled like the spray of the ocean. "Elara, I've spent my life building walls to keep people out. I want to spend the rest of it building a world where you and I are free. Will you marry me?" Elara laughed through her tears and nodded. "Only if I get to plant the garden." "I can plant the whole world," he replied, pulling her into a kiss. The wedding was held on the high cliffs, a beautiful, chaotic mix of silk gowns and barefoot fishermen. The baker's wife and the blacksmith sat in the back rows, humbled and silent. They finally realized that the girl they had called cursed was the only one among them brave enough to be herself. Elara and Alistair's story became a legend in Azure Bay, told to every child who felt like they didn't fit in. It taught the town that gold can buy a house, but only sincerity can make it a home. True wealth is not found in what you have in your hands, but who you have by your side.
Perhaps we will not see you again, so subscribe to this channel to listen to more interesting stories.